For this, she will probably burn in hell. The words were scrawled in shaky handwriting on the very first page, the ink pressed so hard into the paper that it almost tore through. Tyler froze as his eyes ran across the sentence again, unsure if it was meant as a dramatic flourish or a confession. The diary felt heavier in his hands, though it was nothing more than a faded notebook tied with a fraying red ribbon. It smelled of dust and cedar, and the ribbon left faint streaks of dye on his fingertips as if the book itself was bleeding. He sat cross-legged on the floor of Emily's old bedroom, the afternoon light leaking in through the blinds, cutting the air into stripes. She had asked him to help clean out boxes before her parents sold the house, but she'd left him alone upstairs while she went for drinks. That was when curiosity guided his hand to a warped floorboard near the closet. Beneath it lay a shallow gap filled with yellowing receipts, a cracked locket, and this diary. He hadn't intended to open it. Not really, but the ribbon had slipped loose like it wanted him to. Now, staring at that first line, Tyler felt a pressure in his chest that told him he'd crossed a threshold he couldn't go back from. At first, the entries were clumsy, the kind of teenage dramatics he half expected. Complaints about teachers, jealous notes about friends, fragments of daydreams about running away to California. Emily's handwriting was unmistakable, small, tidy letters that leaned just slightly to the right. It felt invasive, wrong, like stepping into a locked room without knocking. Yet he kept reading. One page bled into the next, her voice echoing in his head as if she were sitting beside him. Then, around the middle of the book, the tone shifted. The cheerful entries grew jagged, the ink darker, words etched with force. She wrote about nights she couldn't sleep, about hearing whispers at the edge of her mind, about doing something she couldn't undo. Tyler's throat tightened as he read the line. They'll never find out what I did by the river. They'll never know it was me. He closed the diary so fast the covers smacked together, his heart hammering against his ribs. The river. Everyone in their town remembered the tragedy by the river. It was nearly a decade ago, summer of sophomore year, when a boy from the neighboring school had drowned under mysterious circumstances. Rumors spread like wildfire back then, that it was an accident, that he'd been drunk, that someone had pushed him. Police ruled it inconclusive, and the case went cold. The boy's family moved away, shattered, leaving behind only whispered stories. Tyler remembered Emily mentioning that summer once or twice, always vague, never specific. Now here was her handwriting, trembling across the page, tying her to the one event nobody dared to bring up anymore. Tyler. Emily's voice floated up the stairs. He jumped, shoving the diary under his leg like a guilty child hiding stolen candy. She appeared in the doorway, holding 2 bottles of water. You find anything? Her eyes swept the room, lingering briefly on the closet. For a terrifying second, Tyler was sure she'd noticed the floorboard displaced. But she only smiled, handing him the bottle. Thanks for helping me. This stuff brings back memories, but I just want it all gone. He forced a smile, his throat dry. Yeah, of course. Just old junk. He tucked the diary into his backpack when her back was turned, telling himself he'd return it later, that he only needed to read more to understand what it meant. Yet deep down, he knew he wasn't planning to give it back at all. That night, lying awake in his apartment, Tyler pulled out the diary again. He traced the ribbon between his fingers, feeling how brittle it was. He reread the entry about the river, every word growing sharper, cutting at him. She wrote about watching someone struggle, about turning away, about silence heavy as stone. She described the look in their eyes before the water closed over them. His chest constricted until he slammed the diary shut again. He didn't want to believe it. He couldn't. Emily was kind, selfless, almost painfully honest. She would never. But the handwriting was hers. The fear in her words was real. Sleep never came. Instead, questions gnawed at him. Who was she back then? Did she really let someone die? Was she capable of hiding something this monstrous for so long? By morning, curiosity had become obsession. He told himself he needed the truth, not to judge, but to understand. That was why, instead of meeting Emily for breakfast like they'd planned, he drove to the town library, the diary hidden in his jacket. He spent hours digging through old newspaper archives, scrolling through microfilm until his eyes burned. There it was, July 14, 2013. Local teen presumed drowned in Rockford River. A grainy photo of a boy with sandy hair and a crooked smile stared back at him. Marcus Dean, 16. Body never recovered. The article read. Rumors of foul play, no arrests. Tyler's stomach churned as he looked back at the diary. Emily's entry was dated the same night. As he sat there, the librarian, an older woman with sharp eyes, shuffled past and glanced at the screen. Terrible tragedy, she murmured. That poor boy. His mama never stopped blaming the kids he was with. She narrowed her eyes at Tyler. Why are you looking this up, anyway? He stammered something about a school project, but her gaze lingered, suspicious, before she moved on. His palms sweated as he shoved the diary back into his bag. Already, it felt like eyes were on him, like the town itself was guarding its secrets. That evening, when he finally saw Emily again, her smile was easy, casual, her laugh soft. She kissed him like nothing was wrong, like no ghosts hovered between them. And maybe nothing was wrong. Maybe it was all just teenage guilt scribbled into a diary. But as Tyler held her, he could feel the weight of the red ribbon burning between them, and he knew this was only the beginning. The diary had chosen him, and now he carried its curse. Tyler told himself he wouldn't read more, but the diary wouldn't leave him alone. It was as if the red ribbon had tied itself around his thoughts, tugging him back every time he tried to focus on something else. He carried it in his backpack to work, to the gym, even when he went out with Emily, always telling himself it was just so he could return it at the right moment, though he never did. Each night he read deeper, and each night the picture of her teenage years grew darker. She wrote of friendships soured by jealousy, of fights that turned violent, of secrets whispered in the dark that she swore would never be spoken aloud. And always, between the lines, that night by the river returned like a haunting refrain. The deeper he went, the harder it became to look at Emily the same way. She would smile at him, touch his hand gently in the car, laugh when he said something stupid, but all he could hear was the frantic scribble of her pen describing Marcus Dean thrashing in the current. He tried asking her, casually, if she remembered that summer, if she knew him, but her face went still for just a moment before she shrugged and said, everyone knew everyone back then. It was a small town. The way her eyes slid away from his burned into his brain. He needed more. So he went back to the library, though this time he was careful to avoid the librarian's watchful gaze. He searched for yearbooks, local columns, even police reports if he could find them. The records were thin, scattered, as though someone had deliberately trimmed the story down. But he found enough. Marcus had been with 3 other kids that night, and their names were whispered in online forums that still debated the drowning. 2 names Tyler didn't recognize. One name he did, Emily's best friend at the time, Lisa Connors. He tracked Lisa down on social media. She still lived nearby, working at a diner, her face harder than the smiling photos in the old yearbook. He stopped by one afternoon, ordered a coffee he didn't drink, and waited until she came to his table. You went to school with Emily, he said carefully. Her eyes narrowed, suspicious, before she nodded. Why? Tyler hesitated, the diary heavy in his bag. I've been reading about Marcus Dean. That night at the river. People said you were there. For a second her face went pale, then tightened into something defensive, almost hostile. Who told you that? She hissed, glancing around as though the walls had ears. Drop it. You don't want to dig into that. He pressed, asking if Emily had been there too, but Lisa stood so quickly the chair scraped. I don't talk about that. Not to anyone. Especially not to her boyfriend. She walked away, her shoulders stiff, and refused to look at him again. When Tyler left the diner, he felt eyes on him. A man in a baseball cap sat in a truck across the street, staring openly until Tyler drove off. That night, another entry in the diary seared into him. Emily wrote about Lisa, about how she knew too much, about how keeping her close was safer than letting her drift away. Tyler began to understand. The diary wasn't just secrets. It was a map of leverage, of control, of people bound together by something unspoken. The next day, he tried talking to one of Emily's neighbors, an old man who had lived on the same street for decades. The man listened quietly when Tyler brought up the summer of 2013, then shook his head sharply. Let the past rot where it lies. Kids did stupid things, cops looked the other way, families moved on. You dig, you'll find nothing but trouble. His voice was low, urgent, like a warning. And if you care about her, you'll stop now. But how could he stop when every page made him question who he was lying next to at night? At home, Emily hummed softly while cooking dinner, oblivious to his silence. He wanted to confront her, to shove the diary onto the counter and demand an explanation, but fear held him back. What if she admitted it? What if she lied? Either way, the Emily he thought he knew would be gone. So instead, he asked another casual question. Do you ever talk to Lisa anymore? Emily froze for a fraction of a second before stirring the pot again. Not really. People grow apart. Her tone was light, but he heard the strain beneath it. Later that night, when she was in the shower, he flipped through the diary again, searching for something, anything concrete. His hands shook as he found an entry dated days after the drowning. Lisa keeps asking questions. I told her if she doesn't shut up, people will think she pushed him. She cried. I think she believes me. Tyler stared at the words, while rising in his throat. It wasn't just guilt. Emily had manipulated her friend into silence. The next morning, as he left for work, Tyler noticed something unsettling. His backpack, the one where he hid the diary, had been moved from where he left it. He opened it with trembling hands. The diary was still there, the ribbon still tied, but he couldn't shake the thought that someone had opened it. That night he dreamed of Marcus's face, pale and dripping, whispering through the water, "She let me go." He woke, drenched in sweat, the diary glowing faintly in the moonlight as if it wanted him to keep reading. By now, Tyler understood this was no harmless relic. It was dangerous, a weapon forged of ink and memory. The more he carried it, the more he felt the town turning against him. Suspicious glances, whispered conversations that stopped when he walked by, cars idling too long near his apartment. And Emily, sweet Emily, looked at him with eyes he no longer trusted. He knew he had to dig deeper, to uncover every truth buried in those pages, even if it meant burning down the life they shared. The red ribbon no longer felt like cloth. It felt like a noose tightening around his throat. Tyler knew he was running out of places to look, but obsession doesn't care about limits. It gnaws until there's nothing left but the hunger for truth. The diary had already poisoned his nights, his work performance, even the simple act of holding Emily's hand. He started avoiding her eyes, terrified that if he stared too long he would see Marcus's ghost instead. But the more the town pushed back, the more determined he became to force open the cracks. That's when the unexpected happened. Lisa called him. Her voice on the line was strained, jagged like glass. You shouldn't have come to the diner. People saw. They'll start talking. He asked why she cared, why after 10 years of silence she would reach out now, and she paused before whispering. Because you don't know what you're walking into. Against his better judgment, he agreed to meet her that night, in the parking lot behind an abandoned gas station. She showed up late, looking over her shoulder, chain-smoking like it was the only thing keeping her steady. Lisa told him the story he had been clawing for, though not all at once. She talked in circles, pausing whenever a car passed, as though headlights might be guns trained on her. We were drinking by the river, she began, voice trembling. Marcus got loud, started saying things he shouldn't have. Emily, she didn't like secrets being aired. She shoved him. He slipped. We thought he'd climb back out, but the current, her breath hitched, the current took him. And when I panicked, when I screamed, she told me to shut up or she'd ruin me. Said I'd be the one everyone blamed. Tyler listened, his stomach twisting, but he needed more than fear-soaked memory. Why didn't you tell anyone? He demanded. Lisa's laugh was bitter. You don't get it. This town protects its own. Her family had pull. Mine didn't. The cops closed the case before it started. She flicked her cigarette into the dark. You think it's an accident Marcus's parents left town 6 months later? They were pushed. For a moment Tyler almost thanked her, but then Lisa leaned closer, eyes sharp. You want the truth? Fine. But don't think you'll survive dragging it into daylight. Emily doesn't forgive. She doesn't forget. And she knows how to make people disappear. The words sank into him like ice water. Was she warning him? Or threatening? He went home rattled, the diary suddenly heavier in his bag, its words now given flesh by someone else's memory. But the real discovery came days later, not from Lisa, but from the diary itself. He had been flipping through aimlessly, tracing the ink with his finger, when a page tore loose. Behind it, tucked into the binding, was something he had never noticed, a folded newspaper clipping. He opened it with shaking hands. It was a short obituary, barely a paragraph, for Marcus Dean. The dates matched, the location too, but what stopped him cold was the handwritten note scrawled across the margin in Emily's teenage script. "This is what happens when you betray me." His throat closed. The obituary wasn't just a relic, it was a trophy. She had kept it hidden, as though savoring it, as though Marcus's death had been less tragedy and more justice in her mind. That night Tyler couldn't look at her. Emily curled beside him in bed, resting her head on his shoulder, whispering about weekend plans, while in his mind the words from the clipping pulsed like a heartbeat. He wanted to scream, to run, to burn the diary, but a darker thought kept him still. If she had done it once, what would stop her from doing it again? And if she suspected he knew? The next morning Tyler's life cracked further. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, a photo of him leaving the diner after talking to Lisa, another of him slipping the diary into his backpack. No words, no threats, just proof that someone was watching. He confronted Lisa, accusing her of betrayal, but she swore she hadn't sent anything, that she was being watched too. Her eyes darted nervously, as if shadows themselves had ears. "You think you're chasing the truth," she said, "but the truth is chasing you." Then came the loss. Tyler returned to his apartment one evening to find the lock jimmied. His heart raced as he tore inside, searching. Nothing stolen, except the diary. The backpack lay on the floor, empty, mocking him. He collapsed onto the couch, breath ragged. Someone had stolen the only proof he had, the only tether between suspicion and reality. Without it, all he had were Lisa's half-whispers and his own paranoia. Rage boiled in his chest. He wanted to call Emily, demand to know if she had taken it, but fear strangled him again. If she had, then she already knew he had been reading it. If she hadn't, then someone else was playing a game he couldn't yet see. That night Emily came home cheerful, humming as she carried groceries. She kissed him softly, looked at him with warm eyes, and for the first time Tyler felt nothing but dread. If she was guilty, she had perfected the mask. If she was innocent, he was destroying her with suspicion. He couldn't decide which possibility was worse. But deep down, beneath the confusion, a single truth burned. The past wasn't buried. It was alive, coiled around them, and the diary, whether in his hands or not, had already decided his fate. The next days felt like walking through a collapsing house, each step shaking loose another piece of the ceiling. Tyler barely slept, barely ate, existing only on adrenaline and the gnawing certainty that someone was circling him, waiting for the right moment to strike. The diary was gone, stolen by a hand he couldn't name, and without it his story sounded insane even to himself. He tried reaching out to Lisa again, but her number went dead, calls going straight to voicemail, and when he drove past her trailer the windows were dark, the yard empty, a silence that felt intentional. It was as if she had been erased. He wanted to tell himself she had fled town, but a deeper voice whispered something darker. Maybe Emily had found out. Maybe Lisa had paid the price for opening her mouth. Tyler's paranoia hardened into fear when his landlord knocked one evening, holding an envelope. "This came for you," the man said, expression tight. Inside was a single photo, Marcus by the river, smiling, a picture Tyler had never seen before. Across the bottom, written in thick black marker, were the words, "You're next if you don't stop." His hand shook so badly he almost dropped it. He didn't know who had sent it. Emily, someone protecting her, or a stranger playing puppet master, but the message was clear. He couldn't trust anyone, not even the woman sharing his bed, especially not her. That night he watched Emily cook dinner, her movements casual, her laugh light as she teased him about zoning out. He tried to see something in her face, some flicker of malice, but all he saw was the woman he'd loved for years. And that made it worse, because if she was guilty, she was flawless at pretending otherwise. He thought of the clipping hidden in the diary, her teenage scrawl, the word betray. Could love survive the knowledge that it might have been written by a murderer? Tyler's chest felt like it was caving in. He excused himself, locked the bathroom door, and stared at his reflection. "You're losing it," he whispered, though he didn't know if it was comfort or confession. The collapse grew heavier the next morning when he went to work. His boss called him into the office, frowning. "Tyler, I don't know what's going on, but we've had complaints. People saying you've been snooping, asking strange questions around town. That's not the image we need here." Tyler tried to explain, to stammer something about researching the past, but the words tangled in his throat. His boss cut him off with a sigh. Take some time off. Clear your head. He walked out of the office with his career unraveling, his reputation shredded by whispers he couldn't control. He thought of the neighbors who had started watching him with narrowed eyes, of the way conversation died when he walked into the grocery store. The town was closing ranks, exactly like Lisa had warned. They didn't want the past unearthed. And Tyler, naive, desperate Tyler, had become the enemy. When he returned to his apartment that night, he found another envelope slipped under the door. This time it wasn't a photo but a page torn from the diary, one that hadn't been there before. The handwriting was Emily's, but the words were darker, angrier, as if she had written them in a fever. Some secrets deserve blood. Some debts are never forgiven. If he won't stay silent, I'll make him. Tyler dropped it like it burned, while rising in his throat. Had Emily planted this? Or was someone else trying to frame her, to make him doubt the last bit of love he clung to? He no longer knew what was real. His life had become a stage play with invisible actors pulling strings, and he was stumbling through it blind. The final crack came 2 nights later. He woke to the sound of movement in the living room, soft footsteps across the carpet. His heart thudded as he slid from bed, grabbing the baseball bat he kept by the door. He crept into the hall and froze. Emily was standing there in the dark, holding the missing diary. She looked up slowly, her eyes glinting in the dim light, and for a heartbeat Tyler thought he was dreaming. Then she smiled, a small, unreadable smile, and said, "You shouldn't have gone digging." His throat closed. He asked her where she had found it, why she had hidden it, but she only tilted her head, as though weighing how much to tell. Finally she stepped forward, pressing the diary into his chest. "This is all that's left of a mistake I made a long time ago. You think you want the truth, Tyler, but trust me, you don't." Then she walked back toward the bedroom, leaving him trembling in the hall, clutching the book like it was poison. But when he opened it, the pages were different. Half of them were gone, ripped out. The incriminating clipping was missing. What remained were fragments, carefully curated to paint her as a grieving girl, nothing more. She had rewritten the story, controlled it. The realization hit him like a blade. She knew he had seen too much, and now she was rewriting the narrative to trap him in her version of reality. Tyler sank onto the couch, the diary heavy in his lap, the weight of betrayal pressing until he could hardly breathe. He understood now that he had no allies left. Lisa had vanished, the town despised him, his job was slipping away, and Emily, the woman he had built his life around, was either his tormentor or his executioner. He was alone in the ruins of his own choices, staring at the mask of love and wondering what monster lived beneath it. The night after Emily handed him the butchered version of the diary, Tyler couldn't shake the image of her smile, that calm, practiced expression that hid more than it revealed. Sleep clawed at his eyes but never landed. He spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every glance, every laugh they had ever shared. By dawn he knew the collapse was complete. There was no longer any room for hesitation. He had to confront her, fully, brutally, because the lies had already devoured everything else. At breakfast, Emily hummed softly as she poured coffee, the picture of domestic ease. Tyler's stomach churned. He placed the mutilated diary on the table between them, its red ribbon frayed and limp. "You rewrote it," he said, voice hoarse. She didn't even flinch, only raised an eyebrow as though he had accused her of forgetting the groceries. "Tyler, you're scaring me," she murmured, her tone soft, maternal, but her eyes sharp as broken glass. "That book is old. Pages go missing. Stories change. Maybe your memory is what's faulty." His fist clenched around the handle of his mug. "Don't do that. Don't make me think I'm crazy. I saw what was in here before. Marcus, the clipping, your handwriting. I know what you did." For the first time, a shadow flickered across her face, a crack in the mask. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "And if you keep talking like that, Tyler, do you know what's going to happen? People will stop seeing you as the victim. They'll start seeing you as unstable, dangerous. And when that happens, you won't just lose your job, you'll lose me." The words were a knife twisted with precision, and he knew she was right. Already the town whispered. Already he was marked. He pushed the diary toward her, his voice trembling. "Then tell me the truth. No more games. What happened to Marcus? Silence stretched like a noose. Finally, Emily sighed, as if she had grown tired of pretending. Marcus never should have pushed me that night, she said softly. He thought he could corner me, shame me, ruin me in front of everyone. He thought no one would believe me if I said he went too far. But I wasn't going to let him win. Not then, not ever. Tyler's throat went dry. You killed him, he whispered. Emily's eyes locked onto his, clear, unwavering. I defended myself. I made sure he couldn't hurt me again. And when it was over, when his body lay still by the river, I did what I had to. I buried the truth so I could keep living. She said it with such calm that Tyler felt the world tilt, the walls of the kitchen closing in. The woman he loved wasn't denying it, wasn't spinning stories, she was confessing. And the worst part was that a piece of him understood, even sympathized. He saw the terrified teenager she had been, the girl no one would have believed. But sympathy didn't erase the lies, the manipulation, the years of silence. You should have told me, he said, broken. Emily reached across the table, her hand brushing his. I wanted to protect you. Protect us. If you really love me, Tyler, you'll keep this secret. We can survive this, but only if you choose me over the truth. He stared at her hand, at the delicate fingers that had once felt like safety. Now they felt like shackles. His mind spun with images. Marcus's smiling photo, Lisa's vanishing act, the townspeople's hostile glares. Everything was pointing to the same reality. Emily controlled the narrative, and if he let her, she would destroy him too. I can't, he said finally, voice raw. I can't live with this. Marcus deserves more than silence. Emily's face hardened, the softness draining away until only steel remained. Then you've made your choice, she whispered. She stood, taking the diary, and moved toward the bedroom. Tyler felt the air split around him. He followed, heart pounding, because he knew what came next, the final confrontation, the breaking point. In the bedroom she turned, clutching the diary like a weapon. If you tell them, she hissed, if you breathe a word of this, you won't just lose me. You'll lose everything. They'll crucify you for prying, and I will make sure of it. Tyler stepped closer, his voice shaking with rage. You've already taken everything. My peace, my trust, my life. You can't take more. The standoff stretched, neither willing to back down. Tyler realized then that this wasn't about the diary or Marcus anymore. It was about power, about control, about whether love could survive when built on blood. Emily's eyes glistened, not with tears, but with fury. Then it ends here, she said. She lunged toward the nightstand, and Tyler's heart seized when he saw the flash of steel, a knife she had hidden away. Instinct took over. He grabbed her wrist, the diary tumbling to the floor, pages scattering like ash. They struggled, breath ragged, bodies colliding in the dim light. Stop, he shouted, but Emily's strength was relentless, fueled by desperation. For a moment he saw not the woman he had loved, but the frightened girl by the river, still fighting ghosts only she could see. The knife glinted inches from his face, and in that instant Tyler knew. Only one of them would leave this room intact. With a final surge he twisted her wrist, the blade clattering to the floor, and shoved her back. Emily stumbled, collapsing against the dresser, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. You'll regret this, she spat, voice venom. You'll regret choosing him over me. Tyler stood trembling, the diary at his feet, the truth finally stripped bare between them. The room was silent except for their ragged breathing, the knife gleaming where it had fallen, the diary's torn pages scattered like confetti of ruin across the floor. Tyler's body shook with adrenaline, but his mind was eerily clear now, as if the violence had burned away the fog. Emily sat slumped against the dresser, her chest rising and falling in uneven bursts. Her eyes locked on him with a mixture of fury and something that almost looked like heartbreak. He knew she was waiting for his next move, waiting to see if he would pick up the knife, the diary, or simply walk away. Instead, he crouched and gathered the scattered pages, clutching them to his chest, as if preserving what little remained of the truth. It's over, Emily, he said softly, though his voice cracked. She gave a bitter laugh, low and sharp. Over? You think anyone will believe you? Look at yourself, Tyler. Paranoid, jobless, a man unraveling in public. You're the perfect scapegoat. I don't even have to destroy you. You've already done that yourself. Her words cut, but Tyler didn't flinch this time. Something inside him had hardened. He had reached the end of the collapse, and there was nothing left to lose. He rose, gripping the diary, and walked to the door. Emily's voice followed him like a curse. If you walk out that door, you'll never come back. And when the town finds out, they'll come for you. Not me. Tyler paused, his hand on the knob, his reflection flickering in the hallway mirror. For years he had defined himself through her, built his identity around their shared love, their fragile routines. But now he saw the truth. He was a man who had ignored the warning signs, who had mistaken obsession for devotion, who had buried his own instincts because he loved the wrong person too deeply. Slowly, he turned the knob and stepped out, leaving Emily in the ruins of the life they had built together. The days that followed were a blur of choices no one should ever have to make. He took the diary, what remained of it, and drove to the local police station. Every mile felt like dragging chains, but he forced himself forward. Inside, he handed the evidence over to a detective, explaining everything: Marcus, the river, Emily's confessions, the threats. The man listened with a blank expression, then finally leaned back in his chair. "These pages don't prove anything," he said. "What you've got here is hearsay at best. And with your reputation in this town, son, I'd tread carefully before you make accusations you can't back up." Tyler felt the floor tilt again, but this time he caught himself. He had expected resistance, expected doubt. What mattered was that he had spoken, that the truth no longer rotted inside him. As he left the station, he understood something crucial. Justice was not guaranteed, but silence was no longer an option. At night, alone in a cheap motel room miles from Emily's house, Tyler stared at the ceiling and thought about the cost of his choices. He had lost her, lost his job, lost his standing in the community. He might never recover those things. Yet for the first time in months, maybe years, he felt free. The weight of secrecy had been lifted, even if the consequences were crushing. He wondered if Marcus's family would ever know, if the town would ever admit what had been buried, or if the truth would remain locked in half-burned pages and whispered confessions. But one thought anchored him: Emily could no longer own him. And yet, freedom was not peace. One evening as he returned to his motel, he found a note slipped under his door, scrawled in hurried handwriting: "You'll never outrun me." There was no signature, but he didn't need one. The threat lingered, sharp and certain. Emily was still out there, still weaving her story, still deciding how much more she was willing to lose to keep her secret buried. Tyler sat on the edge of the bed, the note in his hand, and realized this was not the neat ending he had hoped for. Truth had a price, and his was a lifetime of looking over his shoulder. In the weeks that followed, he left town altogether. He found work in another city, kept to himself, tried to stitch together a version of normalcy. But at night he dreamed of the river, of Marcus's face, of Emily's eyes blazing with fury and love, all tangled into one. He dreamed of the diary, the red ribbon frayed, the ink pressed deep enough to scar the paper. Sometimes he woke convinced he still heard her voice whispering beside him. He knew that even distance couldn't sever the bond. Love like theirs didn't just vanish. It rotted, poisoned, and lingered. One night, unable to sleep, Tyler opened his bag and pulled out the one page he had kept from the diary. It wasn't a confession or a threat. It was something Emily had written when she was 15, a simple line in uneven handwriting: "I just want someone to see me for who I really am." He stared at it until his eyes blurred. Maybe that had been the tragedy all along, that she had never been seen, never been believed, until violence forced the world to notice. And maybe he, blinded by love, had failed her too. He folded the page carefully and slid it back into the envelope. The story wasn't clean, wasn't finished, and maybe it never would be. But as Tyler looked out the motel window at the quiet street below, he accepted the truth. Survival was not about finding perfect endings. It was about choosing to live with the scars, the questions, the doubts. Emily's face would haunt him. Marcus's memory would follow him. The diary's words would echo forever. But he had made his choice. He had chosen truth over silence, freedom over chains, even if it condemned him to a lifetime of exile. And for the first time, he believed that was enough.